My name's Carlos Morales. I'll be performing my speech, War in the Middle East. War. Something that has happened since the existence of man. Countless wars, countless battles within those wars, victories, losses, depending on what side of the fence you were on. Allow us to turn back the hands of time, taking us back 19 years to the year of 2001. A year most Americans will never forget. Many of us, including myself, were only babies and have no recollection of where we were at or of what we were doing with our families when this tragedy occurred. We are, of course, talking about the unfortunate event of 9/11. The day that would ultimately resort to the United States waging war on terrorism, a war that we still fight to this day. This means that American troops have been sacrificing, fighting, and dying on foreign soil to carry out the mission of the United States basically ever since I was born. Everybody who was old enough to understand what was happening remembers where they were at or what it is that they were doing when the act of terrorism happened. For many, it was a calling to be the first to defend our Constitution, which led them into joining the armed forces in order to protect our country and its people. I bring you all here today to speak about the darkest side of what another human being can do to another and where it takes place. We are talking about war. We, of course, are not talking about any war, however. We are talking about the ongoing war which has plagued the Middle East with terror and violence. The same war a lot of us probably have had some sort of family member that has either fought or is currently fighting to keep us safe. Nowadays, Americans are still very separated on terms of their political views and moral values. Instead of agreeing to disagree, most people in America nowadays either stand on the far left or they stand on the far right. Very few are smart enough to do what we did when this tragedy happened, and that is to meet in the middle. I was not old enough to see it for myself, but the ones who were there speak of how great and truly inspiring it was to see all Americans come forth as one. At that time, it did not matter who you were voting for. It did not matter if our moral values aligned. It did not matter if we agreed on the same policies. None of this mattered. What mattered that time was coming together and coming to the conclusion of, we love our country. What are we as Americans going to do about this? Which is in fact what weighed in the heavy decision of protecting our nation we built by leaving our homes and going overseas into the heart of where terrorism lies, which is the Middle East. The beginning of the war was horrific, to say the least. War itself is truly horrifying, but this was a war like we have never seen before. Going into a completely new environment from which we are not used to is always one of the greatest challenges. In World War II, it was urbanized warfare, where Allied troops pushed through urban cities in France and Germany in order to stop the Axis. In Vietnam, our troops had to fight a new and different style of war, which is called jungle warfare. They had to adapt to the intense scorching heat and humidity, which is heavy in itself, but that was the least of their worries, seeing as there were Vietnamese snipers in trees and there were kamikaze troops hiding in foxholes all over these jungles that they were patrolling. Moving on to the current war, and we come across a new type. Not just the fact that this one takes place in a sandy desert, but the enemy harbors new types of weapons of mass destruction. War has never been clean, nor has it ever been pretty. It has always been dirty, it has always been ugly. There is no way to say which war was worse than which. But personally, I would be most paranoid about something that is very catastrophic that these troops have to go through every day. And we are talking about IEDs, or improvised explosive devices, aka bombs that terrorists make by hand. I could go on and on about the disgustingly creative ways that these terrorists use these bombs not only against us, but against their own people as well. I will only give a few examples in order to paint a real picture of the differences in all of these wars. Most know about the countless IEDs which are set on the main roads, which are to target heavy infantry assault vehicles which carry American troops. Another way is they will strap an IED onto another human being who is either willing to die or they're usually going to be mentally handicapped, and they will be sent into a crowd of civilians or a crowd of American troops. And well, you know what happens after that. On the bright side of things, however, after years and years, after countless sacrifices, and after many casualties, the US, with the help of other allied countries, are now getting to the point to the war of where we are occupying less and less bases overseas, and every year we're pulling more and more troops out. That is, of course, up until we had what I like to call the Great Scare, because Trump called in a drone strike which killed an Iranian general, which could have potentially started World War III. Thankfully, the Iranian chief said that he does not wish death to America nor the American people, but that he does wish death to Trump and the other high-ranking military personnel who were responsible for the drone strike, which means we avoided a whole war. War is the most raw and unfiltered version of what one man could do to another man for the greater cause that is valued to that individual. This war has lasted through the presidency of 3 different people, but war is something that has happened since the first civilizations were formed, and unfortunately, it will continue to happen long after we are gone. Who knows? It could even happen again within our lifetime. It already did once.